From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
The city of Wichita bringing in an outside reviewer to go over police discipline and policies after a series of scandals. Plus, providing new relief for Kansans suffering from mental health problems in the western half of the state. But first, and then there were 3 or 4. It just depends on how you're counting as we count down to picking Kansas's next governor. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Hello everyone, this is Kansas Week and I'm Chris Frank sitting in for the vacationing Pilar Pedraza. Now last week you might recall State Senator Dennis Pyle was voicing his frustration that his name wasn't on the ballot for Kansas governor yet. This Thursday, that changed as the Secretary of State's office announced it had approved Pyle's petition to be included on the November ballot as an independent. The Secretary of State's office said Pyle's petition was 2,190 pages long with signatures from 85 different Kansas counties. As of August 25th, the office certified his petition as sufficient due to 78 counties verifying a minimum of 6,234 signatures. The law called for just 5,000 verified signatures. Pyle joins Democrat Laura Kelly, Republican Derek Schmidt, and Libertarian Seth Cordell on the November ballot. Kelly and Schmidt, though, not wanting for the newcomer to catch up as they battled it out this week over topics as far-ranging as DCF reforms, educational funding, and the future of recreational marijuana in the state. Well, let's go to Denisha Richard with the KSN Capitol Bureau for the latest on that fight.
I spoke with the owner of the first CBD store here in the state of Kansas. He says that marijuana should have already been legalized. He believes that legislators here in the state should do what he calls the right thing and legalize it. Voters in Missouri and Oklahoma signed a petition to place legal recreational marijuana on the November ballot. But can that happen here in the state of Kansas? The Kansas Secretary of State's office says no. Only legislators can have a say. We reached out to Governor Laura Kelly and her opponent, Attorney General Derek Schmidt. Governor Laura Kelly says she will support medical marijuana, but didn't comment on recreational marijuana. Derek Schmidt did have an opinion. He says he believes legal recreational marijuana could have a negative impact on the state.
I don't want to see us do anything that encourages additional substance abuse and substance addiction in Kansas.
And a poll shows that 66% of Kansans believe that recreational marijuana should be legalized. Reporting from the Kansas State Capitol, I'm Denisha Richard.
Joining me on the desk this week to break this all down, along with many other topics, we have Dr. Russell Arbin Fox on my left, a political analyst from Friends University. Also on my right, State Representative Susan Humphreys, a Wichita Republican, and State Senator Oletha Faust-Goudeau, a Wichita Democrat. And last but not least, joining us remotely, Adam Strunk, Managing Editor at the Harvey County Now. Thank you all for joining us here. Dr. Fox, I want to ask you, what impact does Senator Pyle being on the running for governor here, what impact will it have on the race?
It will have one of 2 possible impacts. One, it won't really move the needle one way or another, or secondly, it might move certain conservative Republicans out of support for Derek Schmidt and into an independent column, which of course wouldn't lead to Pyle's victory because there's simply no way he's going to be able to build up the momentum to win. He could potentially be a spoiler for the Republican candidate. Those are really the 2 things he's looking at. No doubt there are true believers out there around Pyle who are, urging him on and saying he might win, but really the 2 options are, just disappearing from the governor's race without much impact, or actually, causing some real trouble to the Republican candidate.
Right. So he could make it hard for Derek Schmidt as being in that position. Yeah.
Whenever you have 2 people drawing from the same pile of voters, that benefits the people that are looking at a different set of voters.
Yeah. Well, I might ask our lawmakers here, both of you, at this point, You know, there are a lot of topics out there that Governor Kelly and Derek Schmidt have to talk about. Maybe starting with you, Senator, what do you see the topics boiling down to in this governor's race?
Well, I want to say this first, is that the four candidates running for governor have certainly made it interesting. It's generated a lot of attention from the voters now, and it's going to be real interesting, that race will be. But I know that we are talking about recreational marijuana. I know that it would help control the sales, maybe increase our economy. However, I am in strong support of medical marijuana. You know, we know that our dear friend and colleague, Representative Gail Finney, pushed for that to help in situations that she passed with. So that's where I think that we could probably be all on the same page on that issue that they're discussing.
And Representative Humphreys, I mean, what about the economy? Sometimes it just comes down to that, doesn't it?
I think the economy is really important. I think the governor's not been effective in that area. But the one I really want to bring up is education. You know, our students, the outcomes are no better than they were 4 years ago. And even though our governor ran as the education governor, we haven't seen those outcomes any better. And we fully funded K-12. We'd love to see that change. So I think education, and are we creative? What can we do in that case to really help the students and not the system? And if I could just add too, I think Republicans are rallying around Derek Schmidt down ballot. Even today I heard of some more movement. So I think we have thought that Dennis Powell could be a spoiler, but it is,
okay.
I'm glad to see some rallying around.
All right.
Derek.
Well, speaking of education, in a broader sense, education is so broad. But one day after President Biden announced he was forgiving big chunks of student loans nationwide, Kansas Democrats came out with their own plan to help alleviate the costs of higher education. It's a plan they say had nothing to do with the president's actions this week.
Well, state Democrats appear to be riding the coattails of Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, making another push for affordable education. But with Republicans already lashing out over the president's plan, Democrats here could have issues getting this across the aisle. First Biden and now Kansas Democrats are trying to ease the burden for students and families struggling to keep up with rising college tuition prices. While the state locked in a tuition freeze for public universities through 2023, some Democrats say college tuition is not what it used to be.
Tuition costs have gone up about 9% a year for the last 10, 15 years. You know, I was making the comment that, you know, compared to what I spent as a college student from today, you know, it's gone up over 10 times.
State Treasurer Lynn Rogers, along with other Democrats up for re-election, are signing on to a three-part college affordability package. It offers a $150 tax rebate to parents with school-age kids for supplies, books, and fees. It would also extend the deadline for contributing to education savings accounts. And it provides a tax credit for Kansas businesses, allowing them to make certain student loan payments on behalf of employees. But with President Biden's student loan plan already receiving pushback from state Republicans, calling it unfair.
And I think it's very unfair to those folks who chose not to go to college or who chose not to borrow money.
And even Rogers' Republican opponent, Stephen Johnson, casting it down as an attempt to buy votes during an election year. Democrats could face obstacles getting their new proposal past the state's Republican-controlled legislature.
You know, it might help with the election, but I think it's to help make sure that we're talking about it. We hope a lot of Republicans will jump in as well. These really aren't red or blue issues. These are family Kansas issues.
Now, the new proposal from state Democrats is expected to be introduced within the first month of next year's session, starting in January. For now, reporting at the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chung.
Adam, up there in Harvey County, wanted to ask you your thoughts on, you think your readers will still link some of these things with what the president did this week in forgiving some loans. What are you hearing?
It's not, this one I haven't heard a whole lot about the Democratic announcement. Again, like reporting on announcements by the Democratic Party, you always have to have the Republican Party work with them for them to get anything done. So I'm kind of curious to see what the Republican response to this is going to be. I mean, I think that this probably will get packaged with the, Biden loan forgiveness. It's hard for me to think that the timing wasn't meant I feel like people are probably walking kind of a fine line where the people you want to associate with Biden's loan forgiveness program, you're trying to get them to associate the state program, where the people you don't, they're not right saying that, okay, this is tied to the Biden program. But I'm not hearing a ton, but it'll be interesting to see how this progresses.
And to our lawmakers, I mean, do you think some of your constituents will link them together? Because there is that thought, well, how much help is there? And for those of us who've paid off even children's private education, am I paying off someone else's by helping them too much? I don't know. I mean, that's the thought among a lot of people.
Yep.
Either way, just jump in there, Susan.
Okay, I agree about Biden's plan. About the Kansas plan, I agreed with, I think Secretary Rogers said that it's going to get people talking, and that's important because the bottom line is the high price of post-secondary education, and we need to be talking about that and figure out what are the solutions for that. So I think talking about it's great.
Well, I'm certainly in support of President Biden's plan. I have 2 daughters who recently graduated from college, and it certainly would help them. Also, the Democrats' plan, I mean, we've got to do something. We've got to do something to help relieve that financial burden and to help people into higher education. So I'm supportive of both plans.
I do appreciate it. We have to move on. And it may be one of these things where you can help the universities maybe streamline the cost if there's a way of doing that. Well, the lack of mental health beds and services across the state is a problem. For Western Kansans, it could mean driving hours for help for even the youngest in need. But this week, that's about to change, as Cake political reporter Jackson Overstreet shows us.
This building does not look like much right now, but a few barren walls and some work being done. But in just a few months, it'll be a transformative mental health site for children here in Western Kansas. It's a problem that's been impacting Western Kansas for years.
It's been awful trying to find acute care beds for kids from Western and Northwest Kansas.
Wednesday, members of the state legislature and other local officials toured what is hopefully going to be a solution in Hayes. A new mental health facility being built by Camber Children's Mental Health.
This allows children to be closer to their parents.
The facility will have 32 beds, 18 for long-term residential services.
So as you come in here, this is a combination of single and double bedrooms.
And 14 for acute immediate treatment, which is desperately needed in the area. The new facility will allow for 600 more kids a year to be treated. Typically, families out west would have to drive hours for help, and only if there was an opening.
These families have had to travel to Wichita. It was the closest, and most generally Wichita was full. Many of them ended up going to Kansas City.
Camber President Bobby Eckloff says the lack of local access oftentimes forced families to take their children needing mental health care to a local emergency room.
And even though all the emergency departments do a great job, we don't want children who need behavioral health services having to wait in emergency departments.
The Camber facility here will officially open its doors in January 2023. In Hayes, Jackson Overstreet, Cake News on your side.
Senator Goodot, how much difference will this make?
Oh, it will make a huge difference. And I just want to say kudos to Hayes, Kansas, and to our colleagues, Representative Wassinger and Senator Billinger. I know a couple of months ago, I know 2 individuals that attempted to get a bed in our St. Joseph psych ward, and they couldn't get in. And so our young kids today, with COVID, with bullying, with gun shootings, school shootings, we know that they are having some mental issues. And so this is going to be huge. It's going to help so many families that suffer in that area. And I just hope that, you know, someday we can do it statewide to help kids.
Well, Representative Humphreys, this is good for the children out there, but what about adult care services? I mean, there are still needs there.
Absolutely. And Sedgwick County is about 50% of the the folks that go up to learn at our Osawatomie. So it would be great to have something here in Sedgwick County. And it's a top priority. We've been talking about it for years. We need to do something about it. But also the other issue is staffing. And we know that that's going to be a problem if we don't, get the economy going. We've got to get that fixed. So staffing.
An increased number of beds is, of course, crucial. But if you don't also have an increase in staff to help the people in those beds, then increasing the size of the facilities is only getting you halfway there.
Right, and there's the thought that it might rob from other parts of the hospital. Some of the hospital administrators are talking about that. But we move on to our next subject. Indigenous women across the country and right here in Kansas are 10 times more likely to be kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered. The crimes are rarely prosecuted. Kansas lawmakers hope a new law would help change that. That law has been on the books for a little over a year now. So Cake senior political reporter Pilar Pedraza checked in to see how well it's working.
Be cautious to wear a ponytail because, that they could grab your ponytail.
That's what Carol Cadu-Blackwood told us a year ago about what it's like to be a Native American woman living in Kansas.
We shouldn't have to live like this.
Which is why Kansas State Representative Ponkawi Victors-Kozad spearheaded the passage of a new law to address the epidemic of murdered and missing Indigenous women and people, at least here in Kansas. The result, specialized cultural and jurisdictional training for law enforcement officers and concerned citizens involved in trying to find these lost sisters.
It makes more sense now why I have to jump through so many hoops to help to find somebody.
Nicole Rivas leads a group that helps search for the missing in South Central Kansas, as well as nearby states. She was one of the first concerned citizens to take the training. She said the jurisdictional holes she learned about were bigger than she expected.
And I found that none of them work together, that we have to go to each one of them, FBI, BIA, each police department. Everything is separate.
And then there are the problems when cases cross jurisdictional lines, like the current search for Kendra Nicole Botello, who disappeared from Enid, Oklahoma back in July. Her name still not in the National Database of Missing Persons, and other departments can't touch the case just yet.
We are working on a case right now that we told them, we believe she's here in, Wichita. We've been told that she's here in Wichita, and they're like, well, we need concrete evidence.
Nicole believes if more officers took the new training available in Kansas, some of those hurdles might get easier to cross.
I only know of one person in Wichita that's taken it. I hope that I'm wrong on that. But if that's really true, then definitely need to change that.
And a question to Representative Humphreys, starting with you. There has been general approval for this program, but one of the things that's raised is that the lack of number of people enrolling in it, including amongst law enforcement. Is there anything that lawmakers can do around that?
Well, I think one thing to remember is the bill that we passed that in consultation with the Native American Indian tribes, the KBI, local law enforcement, at the direction of the Attorney General, may coordinate investigations. So I do think we need to give it a little bit of time. We all hope that this will make a big difference. It was just last year we passed it. So hopefully as it becomes more coordinated and everyone's on the same page, then we'll see the benefits.
And Chris, I want to say that I was in the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee, which held the hearing. And in the room that day, so many Native American women showed up in that room, and they were sobbing. This is a real issue for them. In the hearing that day, we also had law enforcement in the room, so they heard the passion for this issue, and the individuals in there talked about how they feel that law enforcement just doesn't care. And so I'm hoping that the Attorney General's office, the KBI, the Highway Patrol, and local police will all care about these women that are missing. It's something we need to do. It's a law that was passed, and we need to implement it and do what it says we should do.
Well, and it seems like from the lawmakers, there's a lot of the lawmakers at that time simply didn't realize how serious the problem was.
I think it is just tragedy how the concerns of indigenous people, the native population, have so often fallen through the cracks. Some of that is structurally unavoidable because you have the Bureau of Indian Affairs, because you have, you know, more than 100 years of history of different parts of the government being responsible for different things concerning the native population and not talking to each other. It's sad that that continues to be a reality when it comes to crises like this.
I agree. All right. The city of Wichita this week gambled that outside eyes would help find problems and clear the air for a fresh start, especially when it comes to the police department's reputation. We go back to Cake political reporter Jackson Overstreet for a look at plans for a cultural review.
With near unanimous support,
Having received 6 yeas to 1 nay.
The city of Wichita has hired the consulting firm Jensen Hughes to take a look into the culture and actions of the city's HR department, manager's office, and police department.
The goal isn't to look back and to, I guess, criticize past decisions. It's to look forward and to learn from past decisions, and this is the company to do it.
This move is a direct response to WPD's racist and inappropriate text message scandal from earlier this year. But that is not the full scope of the firm's review.
I want them to uncover everything. You know, we're at a point where we need to do that instead of, you know, a little bit here and a little bit there. I always believe, especially around public trust, you just rip off the Band-Aid, see what's there, and do what you can to fix it.
City manager Robert Layton says the firm will make monthly public reports to the council on its findings until the full review is done. The process will include surveys and interviews with officers, other city staff, and the public.
It provides an opportunity for members of the department and members of the community to make a stronger police department.
WPD Interim Police Chief Lem Moore says he welcomes the review, saying the report should become a helpful guide for whoever takes over the department.
It's not going to be a gotcha type of situation, which is fantastic because then you can be really objective and lay everything out on the line to demonstrate how policies affect decision making and how contract agreements affect decision making.
Well, what's the community response to this?
So I think this is one of the most important votes that the Wichita City Council has made, especially for those who live in the African American community here in Wichita, because for so many years these type of issues that have went on in the police department have been kind of swept under the rug. And so from what I'm hearing from my constituents who this issue will really affect is that they are glad that we are finally putting a new set of fresh eyes on the issue to make sure that we can live together, police and the community, in a more safe, productive way. For years we have had those who were on the inside investigating themselves, and so I think this is so important to move our Wichita, especially for the African American community, forward.
Yeah. Adam, I might get you to weigh in. Is that, for something like this, is it important, how important to get outside eyes, you know, rather than an agency investigating itself?
Well, I think it's incredibly important for public trust and integrity, right? So, I mean, who watches the watchmen? Yeah, you have internal investigation, but I mean, anyone who's been in an institution knows there's an immediate knee-jerk reaction to protect the institution. Yes?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, but yeah, so I think that's really helpful. I think that's really helpful for the community. And I think that's really helpful. I mean, journalists can only do so much. Internal investigations can only do so much. I hope that this kind of goes a little ways in building trust. So I think that was a smart political move by the Wichita City Council.
And let's also emphasize that as much as it is obviously true that so much of the controversy has involved you know, racial issues, you know, the racist texts that we know that Wichita police officers were sharing with each other and whatnot. there have been a lot of controversies that extend way beyond that community. You have, of course, the ongoing concern over Andrew Finch's killing and the unresolved legal issues there. So this is something that yes, absolutely. So this is something that impacts a large number of people in our community in a variety of different ways, and it is absolutely the right thing for the City Council to do.
We've got about 6 months to a year before we hear results from them. But finally today, a goodbye to a longtime member of the Kansas legislature and an occasional contributor here on Kansas Week. State Representative Gail Finney passed away this week at the age of 63. Cake political reporter Jackson Overstreet takes a look at her life and legacy.
When you ask people about Gail Finney, the words that often come up are friend, mentor, and fighter.
Somebody who just really cared about the community and always supported folks who were fighting for the people.
Finney died Saturday at the age of 63. She served 13 years in the Kansas State Legislature, representing District 84, covering parts of College Hill and East Wichita.
Gail sat right behind me in the Kansas Legislature on the House floor. She was someone who, when she spoke, people really listened, because she wasn't someone who seeked attention.
Finney is best known for her fight against the large power poles Evergy placed in people's front yards back in 2018. She was also a major advocate for reforms of suspended driver's license laws and medical marijuana.
It was never ego with her, and it was never, frankly, about her. It was always about the work that she was doing for the community, and we need more leaders like that.
Beyond the impact of her work in the State House, local leaders say Finney was a mentor and someone they aspire to be. Both Wichita Mayor Brandon Whipple and Councilperson Brandon Johnson say they probably wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for her.
She was somebody to talk to. She was someone that when we had challenges in the community, I mean, she was always ready to fight for the community.
Gail was just one of those people who was a quiet mentor, I think, to not only myself, but also to other people who are considered that next generation of legislative leaders or local leaders.
And Representative Humphreys, this is a loss that's going to be felt on both sides of the aisles, won't it?
Absolutely. It's a great loss for the legislature. Gail worked hard for child welfare, civil asset forfeiture, things I could get behind with her, and will continue in her honor. She's a loss for us.
And your thoughts?
The passing of Representative Gail Finney is a great loss to the Wichita community and to the state of Kansas. We've known each other since we were in 7th grade, worked together on many issues. I talked to her husband, Gerald Finney, the other day, and it just broke my heart. He just simply said, "Olitha," he said, "my heart is broken." And, I teared up, he teared up, and I hope that some of the legislation, as Representative Humphreys said, that we will continue working on in honor of Representative Gail Finney, our friend and colleague.
And that work will be going on in the upcoming session in January. So we want to thank you. And we want to thank, again, Russell, Adam, Olitha, and Susan for joining us this week. We had a lot of topics. We hope that you've enjoyed our discussions. We'd also like to thank our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, Cake News, and KSN News for sharing their materials with us. So we'd love to hear from you. So please send us your emails and suggestions on what to bring up in the next coming weeks. Right now, thanks for joining us.